Everybody, oh my God, I got one of them park rangers on my channel. Man, he got a badge, he got the uniform, he got the earplugs. He a ranger. You go to the park, you go see him. He the man on this spot, right? And so what happened is, let me tell you folks, first of all, let me get this part out. I'm Anthony Brogdon. You had strong inspirations. I go beyond myself because I got excited. And so what happens is in America, there's all these historical sites all over the country. And the US government, I know he's going to explain this a little bit better, but the US government manages these sites, make sure that they up to snuff, you know, that they clean, and, you know, you got this historical information there, so on and so forth. And there's a bunch of them around the country, right? So this guy that's on my show, he's one of those managers of a site. Man, he might be the head manager or what have you, but he a big guy, you know what I mean, on the site. And so before we go to him, though, let me tell you what I'd like for you to do. And you know, I really would appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button on the channel. Now, it's free. And it don't do nothing. It don't give you information. It's not no census report or nothing. It just say I subscribe. And then it lets me know you're watching and who my subscribers are. And then if I can, I'll send you a message saying thank you in your subscription email or whatever. Hit the like on this video for sure, because he's going to tell you some stuff that I know you didn't know. And if you did know, you don't know all of what he's going to say. So it's going to blow your mind. Hit the like button on this video. Hit the notifications bell for when I put new videos up. And I'm doing, I don't know, 4 or 5 videos a week. Then you get a ding. You know, you can be the first to watch it. Then you can run out and tell everybody how smart you are because of what you learned on the video. I know that's what you're doing. I can feel it. I saw a guy one night and I was sitting beside him. He was telling somebody something. And I said, man, you learned that on my channel. He said, don't tell nobody. Man, don't do that. Let everybody know about it, right? And then the other thing, I really appreciate you do those 3 things or 4 things. Oh, tell somebody about strong inspirations. Don't do what that guy doing. He's trying to keep it to himself. That's not cool. And then the other thing is, you all might know I'm a filmmaker. And I did this documentary called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. And we talk about Black folks making it big during slavery. I'm not going to give you no more than that. And he's going to talk about one of the guys. I think he in the film. Watch. It's 75 minutes long, and it's streaming on Amazon. And so please watch my documentary. I wrote a book to go with the film. It's called Black Business Book. It's got over 200 facts. Now, the film got some interviews with people whose family owned a business in the early 1900s, right? The book don't have the interviews, understandably, but I do give you more facts. And I give you more facts, so it's very, very, very thorough. It's comprehensive, well written, because I wrote it. I'm telling you, man, it's so good. How about this? My book is so good that if you get the book and you don't learn nothing new, I give your money back. No questions asked. I figure you know everything in this book. You need your money back, right? Because you've been doing a lot of reading. And so that's my book. Both of them are on Amazon. And the movie is on there where you can just watch it on your laptop, or I don't know, you might even watch it on your cell phone, your watch, whatever, and on your smart TV. But also, it's on my website. Check it out. It's called businessintheblack.net. That's my website. So go to there and support the cause, because you're watching this for free, folks. This is how I make my living off my books and my movies and that kind of thing. I got other things going. And then also, I might not have said this in a while, and I know he's sitting there patiently. He said, man, come on, I got to tell this story. I got to go patrol my grounds. But one more thing. the word strong. You hear me use that word a lot. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. I got a strong ranger on my channel and he's ready to go. I'm ready to go. Sir, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's get it on.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for inviting me to the channel here. My name is Chris Farr, and I'm a park ranger at Reconstruction Era National Historical Park. We're in Beaufort County, South Carolina, relatively new unit of the National Park Service. Most people, don't necessarily didn't grow up going on road trips to go visit Reconstruction Era National Park or National Historical Park the way that maybe you did going to Yellowstone or somewhere. This park was just established in January of 2017. President Obama, using what's called the Antiquities Act, signed an executive order creating Reconstruction Era. It was called National Monument at the time. We've since had a name change. Freedom Riders National Monument in Anniston, Alabama, and Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument, of course, in Birmingham. And these three sites are sort of, the vision was and is that these three sites will sort of tell this arc of Black history that the Park Service, had not always, maybe an undertold story within the Park Service.
Okay.
So we've only been around since 2017. We didn't.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Hold on,
sure.
I'll get to you personally though for a second.
Okay.
How do you get to be a park ranger? I mean, and then have the desire to work at a site like this? Your personal thing is it? Yeah. How does that work?
Well, everybody in the Park Service sort of has a different path to becoming a park ranger. All I can kind of speak to is my path. I was a high school history teacher in rural Southwest Georgia. And while doing that, I started to develop a passion for the local civil rights movement history in that town. But conveniently, as far as thinking about a career, that town was near Andersonville National Historic Site, which is a Civil War prison camp. And that's run by the National Park Service. And so I got a job actually 10 years ago this summer. In the summer of 2011, it was a summer program where they would bring teachers on to write like field trip, lesson plan, curriculum materials, things like that.
Yeah, I got you.
And then I did that for a summer and then went to Andersonville full time. And that's sort of really what sent me sort of into the world of Reconstruction history, especially Reconstruction era African-American history.
Yeah.
That was, Andersonville was a Civil War prison camp. And most people kind of think of it as, oh, this is a Civil War site. It's also the National Prisoner of War Museum, which does have a modern story as well. But in a lot of my research and programs, I was doing programming and work on the post-Civil War freedmen community that moved into the old Civil War prison camp.
Okay, let me ask you another question about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And are you a historian? Do you call yourself a historian?
Sometimes, depends on the audience a little bit. The phrase we use a lot of times is public historian, which basically, so I don't write books or anything like that.
Sure.
But I certainly engage in the art of history.
Yes.
But the big phrase that we use in the Park Service a lot is we call ourselves interpretive park rangers. Our job is not necessarily just to be historians regurgitating out a ton of information, but to help facilitate people having experiences in.
Okay, I got you. Now, so you conduct the tours, many of the tours on the site?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So here at Reconstruction National Historical Park, we've got a small staff of rangers here. As I said, we're a pretty new site, so we don't have a huge staff here, but we do have a few park rangers here. I'm one of a few folks that does some tours here, and we do programs. This park, we've got three kind of different areas that make up the park around Beaufort County. So if any of your viewers are familiar with the South Carolina Low Country, we're about halfway between Savannah and Charleston.
Okay.
We're out on the islands there. If you're familiar with Hilton Head, that's really close by.
Oh yeah, I like Hilton Head. I've been there.
So you're going to be a little familiar with the history of the site here. So there's officially sort of three areas that make up the park.
Okay, let me stop you there. Hold on, I'm staying on you though for a second,
okay,
my friend. I mean no harm. So you tell the story of what happened there in front of these crowds? Has anyone ever told you something about your site that you didn't know, that said, oh man, I didn't know that?
Every day. So that's
okay.
Park ranger is being a good listener. We aren't just out there, giving lectures and stuff, especially at a site like this, where, part of the reason why Reconstruction Era National Historical Park is in Beaufort County, South Carolina, is because sort of the legacy of Reconstruction, a lot of the policies began here, but the legacy kind of continued on. So as an example, earlier this summer, I was working on just trying to write up a little quick website, Facebook post for something. And I was trying to find a guy's grave, somebody who had served in the Union Army during the Civil War and had bought land here after the war. And I was working on trying to research him, and I'm out in the woods, tramping around trying to find this guy's grave. And literally I kind of stumbled onto a farmer who was out there who's still farming land that his great-great-grandfather had purchased in 1866. I just sat there and listened to him talk for an hour. So yeah, we certainly do try to listen.
Yeah, now, does this, if you don't mind, I say this, guys, just because, how does this make you feel, personally, to be on this site? As an African American person, right. And being what I do now, I love history. And I've asked this to other people, but sometimes it's a little overkill for me. I mean, I can only take it in doses and stuff like that. I couldn't take it every day, let's say, not with the beat down. How does that, and from your position, how does that make you feel to see? And then, and some of the people that come through there, they have these different reactions. Maybe some of them might cry. How does that do, sit with you, let's say?
It depends on the reaction and the cause of it. One of the reasons why this park is here is because this is a place where Reconstruction was successful, right? And so,
okay, I like it.
A lot of our story, I mean, it's an hate word this way, but a lot of the story here locally is, this idea of Black empowerment, this idea of Black, we're talking about like business owners, and that's a lot of the story here. And so, when you talk about like, well, the beat down, that was certainly something that I struggled, maybe isn't the right word, but that we sort of dealt with a little bit when I worked at Andersonville, I also worked at Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park.
Sure.
When you're dealing with African-American history that is rooted in slavery, that is rooted in cruelty, that is rooted in oppression. But here, the story is that at least the story that we really emphasize is that of Black resistance, of Black empowerment. And so, at least mentally, you don't ever really kind of get that beat down.
Okay.
It's a site people are proud of. The local community here is they're proud that this park.
Okay, I love it. Yeah. Now there has been a big movement in the last few years, understandably, and I'm sure even prior to that, to get rid of Confederate monuments and statues and things of that sort. There's nothing like that there, though, is there, on your site?
Not within the park. So
okay.
Suits the park. We've got a little building in downtown Beaufort that's going to be just a little small museum. The campus of the Penn Center out on St. Helena Island.
Yeah.
Which you may be familiar with Penn Center if you've
I've been there. Yep.
Been to the area. Well, officially, you've been to the park.
Officially, yeah. Okay.
Penn School National Historic Landmark District is officially park boundaries. And in the Park Service, we own one building out there, and then we've got a conservation easement with the brick church across the highway there. And so that's a site that the community here had been preserving and protecting for well over 100 or for 150 years.
Okay, I love it. Yeah.
Park Service, before the Park Service showed up. The third area of the park is it's called Camp Saxton. It's down in Port Royal, down near the Beaufort Naval Hospital. Not a lot there to see yet. We don't have a museum or anything in place yet down there, but it was one of the first, if not the first, recruiting depots for African American soldiers during the Civil War. So
okay, I got it.
Not like a Civil War battlefield that's going to have monuments and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I guess there's one more question in, and let's talk more. Okay. If you've already given us a lot on the site, has there been anybody who, because it's got such a positive slant, let's say a racist wanted to damage the site in some regard because they did the research, you know what I mean? They did the history and say, oh, I don't like that is being told. Is there any of that type of thing?
Not that we've run into yet, but as I said,
we're
a relatively new unit of the National Park System, and one of the things that certainly helps prevent some of that type stuff within national park sites is, we are federally managed. And so, folks, even just something as innocuous as, putting graffiti on the side of something in a federal park. I mean, that carries that's a little stiffer penalties than it is
Yeah, I got you.
in town. So that would tend to serve as a deterrent. But the big thing here is almost the entire community here is excited about this park being here. Both the African American community that's been here literally for 300 years on these islands, as well as more recent folks that have come in. They're all very supportive of the park.
I got you.
I'd be really surprised if somebody came out. Now, there are certainly people that don't necessarily like the way that we talk about Reconstruction, but they're typically not going to come out.
Yeah, I got you. I love it.
Or anything like that.
I love it. And then this is the last question on the site, on the park itself. Was that when it became under the management of the U.S. government, did you all, and I know you did, and you're probably still, this is an ongoing effort, do some things to spruce things up? Did you paint things? Did you, did more, you know what I mean, to the lawn, to the buildings, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so
were damaged?
A little bit. Well, so one of the things is that the federal government, or the Park Service, we're not always the fastest at getting some of that stuff done. But so the park was established in 2017. Really didn't get its first actual budget until a year or two after that. So we've really only had a budget here to start bringing in staff for the last year or so, a little over a year now. And so we certainly have plans in place. To try to restore the building that we manage out at Penn Center. It's called Darrah Hall. We've got a project in place now to try to fix the air conditioner in there. Once the air conditioner's fixed, then we can try to fix the floors and try to fix the walls.
Sure.
That kind of stuff. We bought a lawnmower so we can cut the grass and some of that kind of stuff. But it's important because so much of our park is working in partnership. So we're really unique. It's not like say going to a big Civil War battlefield like Gettysburg or Yellowstone, and that there are areas that constitute the park grounds, but we the Park Service don't own it. We didn't come in and take over things. So there weren't things that were just destitute and falling apart that we had to come in and do stuff. Penn Center was doing and continues to do a great job at maintaining that, and preserving it. And so we work with them. It's a collaborative effort. So. But there's plans underway to get some, permanent exhibits put in and museum exhibits and get some of that spruced up.
Are there parts of the park that need to be rebuilt? I mean, is there a building that was torn down that you'll like to see rebuilt one day, a slave camp? You know what I mean? Something like that that tells more that actually happened there that is not there today.
Certainly. Well, so I don't know that we'll be in the business of rebuilding things. That are no longer there. But one of the things and one of the reasons why this park is here is that a lot of those properties and things that are all over, especially in downtown Beaufort, a lot of those places still exist. So when we talk about, for example, I believe you were alluding to earlier in the introduction, Robert Smalls, his house is still standing. I'm 3 blocks away from his house. A lot of stuff that are downtown here. Those are all privately owned, that people live in them, but they're sort of within our park storytelling playground. So we can kind of lead tours and stuff going down the street and doing stuff like that. But so there's not a ton of, we don't have a wish list of saying, oh man, we need to rebuild this.
Yeah, right. So now let's go back over this again so it helps me understand.
Okay.
The park is covering how many miles or what?
Well, as far as what officially constitutes the park, not a lot. I mean, we're looking at less than 100 acres that are officially.
Oh, okay.
But because I said it's a collaborative enterprise, if you will, between the federal government, Penn Center, the Department of Defense manages some property that's officially designated as the park.
I got you.
County has some property, so it's a collaborative thing. It is an example, like downtown. I'm actually at our downtown office right now. The Park Service only owns one small little building on one little city corner, but this entire downtown district is our storytelling playground. So again, a little bit of a unique.
I got you.
Operation.
I got you. So now, when we talk about the Reconstruction period, let's go to that. We're actually talking about when do they say it officially begins? Do they say the day after slavery, the Civil War ends in 1865, or is there a date when they say this is Reconstruction as deemed by such and such president, so on and so forth?
That's a great question. So, and that's, the traditional definition of Reconstruction, if you think back to like your high school history class, if the teacher talked about Reconstruction at all, they probably started it at the end of the Civil War, right? The summer of 1865. However, the way that we kind of define it is, and the way that I often explain it to the public when they're on our tours and we're just talking to people, is to, Reconstruction began in any given location when the authority of the United States was restored and that process of emancipation began. So here in Beaufort County, South Carolina, the islands around the Port Royal Sound, including Hilton Head, which I know you said you'd visited before, this Reconstruction began here in the fall of 1861, right at the start of the Civil War. Confederates attacked Fort Sumter in April, and by November, the U.S. Navy sailing into the Port Royal Sound, they defeated Confederate garrison out on Hilton Head and out at the end of St. Helena Island. The white community here fled. They thought they were all going to get hanged for treason. They thought the people they enslaved were going to turn against them in slave revolt, so they abandoned the town. So now the U.S. military comes ashore and they find, these islands, like all the buildings are abandoned and have now been occupied by formerly enslaved people. They find, there's 15,000 Black people looking at the U.S. military saying, what's next? And the military didn't have a good answer on this in the fall of 1861 and early 1862. And so by the spring of 1862, they launched what's called the Port Royal Experiment, which is sort of a multi-tiered, I hate to use the word plan because sometimes there's not a lot of planning that goes with it, but the Treasury Department, for example, it's all about this transition from what does a slave society look like to what does a post-slavery society look like. Okay. So, for example, the U.S. Treasury Department came down and they see all these cotton fields that are all over these islands, and they said, "Oh man, we should sell that cotton and fund the U.S. war effort during the Civil War. Hey, we need all you slaves go pick that cotton." And of course, all those enslaved people went, "No, we're good. We're not doing that anymore."
Yeah, sure.
And so the Treasury Department actually steps in and launches basically a jobs program where they start paying people wages to work these cotton fields. Now, I don't want to make it seem like it's good work or even that the wages were good. The conditions were very similar to enslavement in terms of just your day-to-day work conditions. But at the end of the day, you are getting a wage. That's going to be really important because later on, as part of these efforts at sort of anticipating what does a post-slavery world look like, they say, well, you know what, who owns this land? The people that are enslaved or had been enslaved, this is before the Emancipation Proclamation. So even are they enslaved? Are they not enslaved? Even that's all up in the air in the spring and summer of 1862. And so they begin to ask questions, well, who owns this land? Well, we're working these fields. Well, we should own these lands. And the government saying, well, no, technically those landowners own these lands. Well, they abandoned them. They're not paying their taxes. So starting in early 1863, the U.S. government launched a series of direct tax auctions here all across Beaufort County, where abandoned lands, that includes mansions in downtown Beaufort, but that also includes farmland, are auctioned off for unpaid taxes that the white landowners had obviously not paid because they'd abandoned everything, gone inland up to Columbia or somewhere. Well, so if you had been a formerly enslaved person, and let's say you've been, picking cotton for wages now, and you've made, $30 or $40 over the course of a season or two, and land can be purchased at a tax auction, we'll say at $1.50 an acre, suddenly you can buy land. Some of the folks have been able to acquire more funds and actually turned around and bought some of these big mansions that are downtown. So these early efforts at property redistribution is another part of the Port Royal Experiment. They began efforts to recruit African-American soldiers into the U.S. Army. This is one of the first places where that's happening. They become known as the first South Carolina Volunteers, later redesignated the 33rd U.S. Colored Troops.
Okay, I like it.
They're organized here, but one of the biggest parts of this Port Royal Experiment is the building of schools, establishing schools. So before the Civil War, in most places in the Deep South, it was a crime to teach Black people to read. Right? They were the white landowner, the political class, was afraid of an educated Black population would organize and rise up in a slave revolt, or look, if you're enslaved and you can read and write, now you can start forging freedom papers. You can start forging passes. Oh yeah, I got a pass to go over here at 10 o'clock tonight. You know, they don't want any of this. So it's a crime to teach Black people to read.
Right.
A lot of these Northern abolitionist societies before the war had been just looking for the opportunity to come to the Deep South. And you know what, if we just build schools, that could be the path, you know, sort of out of slavery.
Right.
So as soon as the US military captures this place, all those abolitionist societies jump at the opportunity. They go, wait a second, we now have an area that is not under Confederate control. It's now under US military control. Thankfully, some of the US military leaders that are here, guys like Thomas Whitworth Higginson, Rufus Saxton, David Hunter, some of these are guys who are abolitionists themselves.
Right.
And James Montgomery. And so they're, yeah, y'all come on down. And so all these teachers and Northern abolitionists start, missionaries just start pouring into the area to build schools. The most famous being the Penn School out in St. Helena, Ohio.
Yeah, I'm
familiar
with that one. And then the Rosenwald program, where they built a lot of schools too.
Now that's the area. Yeah, now that's coming a little bit later.
That's a little bit later. Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be a little bit later. So sort of these early efforts at sort of building schools here. This has taken place here in 1863, 1864. You know, these efforts at property redistribution. This has taken place in 1863.
Okay, I got you. Now, when we talk about the white slave owners fleeing from their property, to me, I'm thinking, okay, I'm fleeing, I'm running because I got, you know, I'm gonna run 2 miles away, 3 miles not to get caught. But then when the soldiers leave, I'm going back. Do you see much of that where they return and then there's a battle between them and whoever's there on their property?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, first off, when we think about, you know, it's the fall of 1861, when these white landowners abandon their property, it's the start of the Civil War. They think they're going to win this. Like, nobody goes to war thinking they're going to lose.
Okay.
Right? So these white landowners are thinking, well, you know what? By the way, these are some of the richest people in the United States before the war. Beaufort's one of the richest cities in America prior to 1860. And so these are folks, they got mansions up in Columbia, up near Clemson, Charleston, Augusta, they're all over the place. So they all need their inland homes and all this kind of stuff. They're just thinking, you know, we'll just ride it out. And then at some point, the Confederates are either going to come back down here, drive the US Army out of Beaufort, or we're going to win the war. That's how they're viewing it. That doesn't happen, of course. You know, we have the benefit of hindsight. We know how this all turns out. We know that the Confederacy is defeated, that the authority of the United States is restored. We know that we're going to pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, abolishing slavery, establishing citizenship and voting rights. Well, so when that happens, some of these pre-war landowners did try to come back here.
I'm sure.
And reacquire some of their lands. Some were successful, but many were not. And it's one of the conundrums of sort of talking about Reconstruction from here in Beaufort is the position of the United States government during the Civil War was that secession, I can't talk today, was that secession was not legal, right? That's the US government during the Civil War. So the way that they view it is, well, all of these Confederate landowners, when they abandon their homes, they're just United States citizens that have abandoned their properties, and those can be confiscated and sold for unpaid taxes. So after the war, when some of these folks file lawsuits or go to court or try to get their lands back, the courts actually side with the formerly enslaved people and say, nope, you know, you guys voluntarily abandoned your properties.
Okay.
Own these lands fair and square. Now, there were a lot of people that were able to reacquire their lands. So, you know, not all the farmland, not all the mansions were purchased by formerly enslaved people.
Yes.
Some were purchased by U.S. Army officers who, hey, the war's over, I'm going back to New York or New Hampshire or wherever. I'll put this house that I've been living in for the last year on the market, and, you know, maybe you can come back in and rebuy your property that way.
Yes.
So Black land ownership and Black farming is widespread throughout these islands, throughout the 1860s and the 1870s, 80s, and even into the 1890s. The geographic isolation made it out on these islands, and demographic and just numerical superiority of the African American community here made it much more difficult for people to come out and say, start trouble, do things like that. But what that idea that secession wasn't legal, you know, that's what allowed the Black community here to keep their lands and their homes but that's also what backfired against Black people kind of everywhere else. So if you were an enslaved person, say living in West Georgia or Central Alabama or somewhere, and it's 1865, the Freedmen's Bureau comes in, they confiscate some white farmer's land, they give it to you. Well, then that white farmer turns around and files a lawsuit and says, well, y'all are saying secession wasn't legal, so therefore my property has been illegally confiscated without due process. And the courts go, oh yeah, you're right. And so these folks their lands back and force people into sharecropping. So what's happening here is somewhat unique compared to, say, what's happening to Black farmers and landowners, even 100 miles inland in South Carolina.
Okay. Now let me ask you this: can we say that the Reconstruction period was one of the best things that the federal government did for the African Americans?
There certainly are lots of historians that'll make that argument. That's W.B. Du Bois, who you're probably familiar with. His book Black Reconstruction. I mean, that's basically that's part of what he's arguing, is that this is a time period in which sort of Black Americans, the way the phrase he uses, and I love this expression. He said, Reconstruction, he talks about people. It said it's a brief moment in the sun.
Yeah.
Right? This is a time period with a very active federal government. It's they're establishing government agencies to go out and provide direct support, whether that's Freedmen's Bureau or the Freedmen's Bank.
Lincoln wasn't the president. Who was the president at the time?
So that's one of the fun questions, and fun maybe isn't the right word here, of talking about Reconstruction. And some of that depends on how are you defining when Reconstruction begins. So if we're saying Reconstruction began here in Beaufort County in the fall of 1861 and spring of 1862, Abraham Lincoln's the president then. But if you're looking at it as a strictly post-war story, well, then it's not. And now you're looking at Andrew Johnson as the president. But then following him is Ulysses S. Grant. And then Rutherford B. Hayes. And so on. And that does get into when you want to argue Reconstruction ended.
So now we can all say then, I mean, not just South Carolina is unique in this regard, that all along that wherever we can say Reconstruction began, where the Union troops came in and pushed out the Confederate landowners and whatnot. So we can actually say it happened in other parts of the country and other states, just like you claim 61 other places can too.
Yeah. So in any given locations, when the authority of the United States is restored, and when that slow process of emancipation begins.
Right.
For example, if you're I don't know, like in Chattanooga, Tennessee, right? I lived there for a little while working for the Park Service. U.S. Army captures Chattanooga finally in November of 1863, and that city becomes just a magnet for enslaved people liberating themselves as refugees. Right. So you can say Reconstruction begins in Chattanooga in the fall of 1863.
I got you. Is that the phrase they coined it back then? Did they call it the Reconstruction period, or did they have a term? Is that what they called it?
Reconstruction. There was a congressional committee, called the Committee on Reconstruction. So yeah, they were calling it Reconstruction even then. Now they were thinking of it in largely a physical sense, right? We need to physically reconstruct the United States.
Okay.
So after 4 years of incredible violence, but we can kind of look at it in a little bit more of an expansive view sometimes and talk about, well, we have to reconstruct our political systems, our social systems, our economic systems, like sort of all of that is part of this rebuilding of the United States. And there's even some historians who even use the phrase, they'll call it the second founding, right? With the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
Yeah, now, I got to throw some little salt on it. The Reconstruction period sort of ends.
Yeah.
Because does that president, and tell us a little bit, but does he say one day, whoever the president is, and you know the name, hey, that period is over. We're going back to where it was. We're going to start throwing in these Jim Crow laws and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so that process.
What's the difference there between that day and the new day?
Yeah, so that process is gradual as well. So just as sort of Reconstruction starts as that process of emancipation begins, in any given location, that process of Reconstruction is going to end when effectively the pre-Civil War, white political power structure sort of resumes authority in any given location. So, for example, in my hometown in West Georgia, Reconstruction is basically done by like 1871, 1872. Like nobody's coming in and protecting the freedmen's vote.
Yeah, right.
Nationally, a lot of times people will look at the election of 1876. So in the run up to the election of 1876, there's this sort of growing anti-Reconstruction movement, politically speaking, around the country, at least amongst white Americans. And so there's a dispute. The presidential election is disputed in 1876. South Carolina, Louisiana, effectively each state, these few states actually can put up multiple slates of electors, like both sides saying, no, we really won the election. Here's the people that we're sending to the electoral college. And so, allegedly, there's a backroom deal reached. This often called 1877, in which Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican, agrees to withdraw the last of the remaining federal troops from the South in exchange for an electoral college victory. And so Louisiana and a few other places, okay, fine, we'll do that. And that is an important landmark for thinking about how Reconstruction begins to fall apart, because what had been keeping Reconstruction in place in a lot of regions was the presence of the U.S. military. U.S. Armed Forces are there. If you're a black citizen and you're trying to go to the polls in Texas, Louisiana, or something, chances are those polls are being guarded by soldiers to make sure that white vigilantes, groups like the Ku Klux Klan or the Red Shirts here in South Carolina, aren't engaging in violence against you. Once those troops go out, that sort of leaves the pre-war white order to.
Okay, let me stop you there. I buried that under these two, under the good. We did all that good. Now we did that little bad there because it's got to be some. Let me go back to the good again, and then as we kind of come to a close out, let's say. The good goes into, during that Reconstruction period, they allowed black men to vote.
They did.
And so now we started to say, it's so many of us, they voting in senators and governors and all type of, Hiram Rebels come out of the South Carolina area, doesn't he?
Hiram Rebels is a senator from Mississippi.
Mississippi, okay, but we had, that's U.S. senator, that's not a state senator. Yeah, we had senators and all kind of people got voted in.
Yeah, so a couple of things are starting to happen. So we use and this is sort of how this park works, right? We use South Carolina and the South Carolina Low Country as a case study for kind of everywhere else. So right after the Civil War in 1868, the state of South Carolina, as part of their readmission back to the United States, one of those little conundrums where the government says, well, secession wasn't legal, but we're going to make you have to rejoin the United States. Things don't quite add up, but they said, all right, well, you guys have to create a new state constitution, one that basically abolishes slavery and protects the rights of black citizens. So 1868, South Carolina produces a new state constitution that guarantees public schools. Robert Smalls, who's certainly Beaufort's most famous Reconstruction figure, he's one of the delegates there. He's sort of the father of the public education clause in there. But that state constitution granted black men the right to vote in South Carolina. In 1870, that's going to go national. When Congress passes the 15th Amendment, in theory, black men are supposed to have the right to vote. Now, it sort of backfires. So we're going to kind of go into the negative here a little bit. But at least for this few years, particularly in states like South Carolina, in Mississippi, you're looking at massive numbers of African-American men are not only voting, but are being elected to office. Well, in South Carolina in 1860, so right before the Civil War, 60% of the population in South Carolina is black. And so when you suddenly, tell everybody, every male they can vote, guess who's winning the elections? People like Robert Smalls, people like Hastings Gant, people like Prince Rivers, who's one of my favorite figures of Reconstruction here in the area. But that 15th Amendment also sort of plants the seeds for how Jim Crow can rise. Right? 13th Amendment abolishes slavery except as punishment for a crime. So as southern states begin to sort of resume political power, or southern so the white politicians begin to resume political power, they use that accept as punishment for a crime bit to basically just start, arresting black people through the South willy-nilly. And then the 15th Amendment, it doesn't guarantee a right to vote. And that's something that's a little weird for people to think about. We go, 15th Amendment gave people the right to vote. The 15th Amendment just says that the right to vote can't be taken away based on race. Well, as people, as white Southerners, white conservative Democrats begin to sort of restore power or come back to political power, they use that. They say, well, you know what? It just says we can't deny the right to vote based on race, but that implies that we can deny the right to vote. And so that's when they start passing laws like, you know what? Oh, if you've been arrested, we're not going to let you vote. If you can't pass this reading test, we're not going to let you vote.
Yeah, right.
All that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, so there was this 10 or 15 year period there where, especially in states like South Carolina and Mississippi that had, just tremendously large African-American populations, where a lot of your state and local political leadership was African-Americans.
Yeah, I love it. You're doing a great job. I appreciate you telling us all this. Now, as we kind of come to a close, just on timing and that kind of thing, we're going, for much longer, understandably. And because you're a historian, you're not just a park ranger. We're going to give you the historian title. What at your site? What buildings are there? When are you open? Tell us a little bit about so we can come down.
Yeah. So as far as buildings that officially constitute the park, in downtown Beaufort, it's what everybody locally calls the old firehouse.
Okay.
Going to be a little small museum and visitor center. It's not very big. It's just a little one-room operation. And because we are a new site, our hours of operation and stuff are very sort of fluid these days. So
sure.
Website for whatever the up-to-date stuff is. But then also on the campus of the Penn Center, Penn Center gave to the Park Service one building called Dara Hall. And we've sort of turned that into a little bit of a temporary museum space. We also have a conservation easement with Brick Baptist Church, which is a Baptist church that's across the highway from Penn Center there. And that's where some early classes for Penn School were meeting. It was also a voting precinct starting in about 1868 after the Civil War. And so those are sort of the buildings that are there. So not a lot of buildings that are officially within the park. But that said, if you're walking through downtown Beaufort, right, you can go see Robert Small's house.
So when people come and you give them a tour, where do they meet you at? And then how do you give them a tour? You got a bus that you take them around to all these sites? How do you do your tour?
Right now we're all on foot. So
okay, I got you.
We don't take it. We can't take everybody.
Because of the conditions.
Yeah. So that's in our downtown site. What's going to be our visitor center, the old firehouse. We're about 3 or 4 blocks from Robert Small's house to the east of us, and about 3 or 4 blocks from Robert Small's grave to the west of us. Typically, Robert Small's features pretty prominently on our downtown tours.
Okay.
Out at Penn Center, we basically go from Dara Hall to Brick Baptist Church. And
I got you.
Places
I got you.
Out there.
I got you.
We are working with the Navy, Beaufort County, and the city of Port Royal to start to do some tours exploring the Camp Saxton site as well.
I got you.
We're all going to be all walking.
I got you. I love it.
We don't have a bus or anything.
What's the website?
Great question. So the website is www.nps.gov/REER.
Ooh, we're going to do it. Oh, hey, folks, before we go, check it out. I told you I know a little history. Let me tell you, this Robert Small guy, he talks about, well, he was, real big man around there as he tells you about all the sites. But one of the things, I think I got this right, he was a enslaved person, and he hijacked a ship.
Yes.
That's the right guy. He hijacked the ship, and that's how he fled to freedom. It's in my book.
So Robert Small was born in April of 1839. Just a few blocks away from me. He was enslaved by a man named Henry McKee. And when he was about 10 or 12 years old, he was leased out or sent to Charleston to work on the docks there. And that's where he was at the start of the Civil War. He was an enslaved crew member on board a private vessel called the Planter. That then the Confederates were sort of retrofitted as a gunboat to shuttle stuff across the Charleston Harbor. On the night of May of 1862, Robert Smalls and the other enslaved crew members all the white crew members, all the white Confederate crew members go ashore, and these two enslaved men kind of look at each other and go,
right.
Well,
and he took off.
And we know that they've been planning it for a while because we know on the way out they stopped in at a wharf and they picked up their families.
Yeah, he picked up his family.
Got his family, and then they sailed out past the Confederate defenses because these guys had all been enslaved crew members. You can do all the secret codes you had to give to get past the Confederate defenses.
Yeah.
Sail right out to the U.S. Navy, and when they get out there, turns the planner over.
Yeah.
The tradition of the air is if you capture an enemy vessel, you're given a cash prize for the value of the ship.
Oh, so really? He got money too.
He got money, and that's how he comes back to Beaufort. And in 1863, at that tax auction, he actually purchased one of the downtown mansions, but not just any mansion. He purchased the mansion of his enslaver.
Wow, my God.
Which is, that's just a great story.
My God, great story. Everybody, strong inspirations. We give it to you straight, no chaser. I put a little ice in it. I find the people who know what they're talking about, and I let them tell it. I just try to come up with some questions. And I thank you for watching, my viewers. And to you, my guests, I thank you for being on the show. I'm going to tell your higher ups, you good. I'm going to put a Yelp on you and make it sound. I thank you for being here. And so I say this with all sincerity, that I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, because we love what you're doing and educating them people and protecting them properties. So much so, I like to say, we out. Bye-bye.
Thank you.